Awesome. Hello, hello. My name is Jennifer Kenny Smith. I'm the area sales manager at GitLab for our civilian sales division, and I am super excited to host a panel with ATARC. And this panel came to fruition from a conversation that I had at the ATARC GuiTech event with Brian Fox and Nina Bianchi, who both former feds. We were talking about innovation in regards to digital transformation and IT modernization, and being on the forefront of the discussions of helping the government innovate. And that's super cool. And I like doing that. And I've been a part of the vendor industry for my whole career. But sometimes things get kind of stuck past the discussions of innovation to when does it go into the dark hole of procurement? And it's always been challenging to understand how to help advocate for the technologists within the government to work with procurement and help build out the talk track, the value, the requirements, the test, the proof of concepts, all those things. So we decided to just bring those super smart people to a panel. And I had the privilege of meeting with them about 2 weeks ago to pick their brain, and I'm blown away. They're ridiculously creative, very innovative, and they want to be a part of the forefront of the discussions. And they're bringing so much value. So for the people that are listening from industry, from our FSIs, from our resellers, as well as other government leaders that are wanting to make change happen, I invite you to lean in and listen and hear what these folks are doing because they're incredible. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my first speaker, Harrison Smith from the IRS. Hello, Harrison. Could you introduce yourself?
Hey, Jennifer. I think you forgot to say a whole bunch of awesome people and Harrison, but we'll let that one slide. No, my name is Harrison Smith. I support the Enterprise Digitalization and Case Management Office, and because that's a pretty large mouthful, I usually just go with Team Digi. But been in this role for about 2 years. Before that, I was supporting Ms. Weber's and the rest of the procurement team here over at the IRS. And before that, I spent some time at the Department of Homeland Security with Mr. Simpson. There we go, with Mr. Simpson and others. And before that, a little bit of time at the Naval Sea Systems Command. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome. So Harrison, we talked about 2 years ago you were one of my first guests on the podcast for DevSecOps and digital transformation. And you told me about this really great idea that you were creating and starting to roll out for paid for proof of concepts. So for technologists that want to get tech into the hands of leaders in the government, and the government actually put some skin in the game, which is so awesome. Can you share a little bit about what that is? And now that it's been 2 years, how's it going?
Yeah, no, thanks, Jennifer. I think one of the biggest pieces there is when we first talked, I think I was still with procurement and looking for more frequent customers of the approach that we call Pilot IRS. And now it's been extremely interesting over the past 2 years being a customer of procurement. And however hard I thought it was to generate requirements documents and procurement requests and the like, when I was in procurement, I undersold it significantly. It's very hard to do. And I'm sorry to anybody who I told it was easy to write a requirement, don't worry about it. But that's actually a piece where we have been working really hard to streamline it. Pilot IRS uses existing authorities that, frankly, any agency can use in the Federal Acquisition Regulation 13.5, and it allows you to mirror the approaches that the private sector takes to make agreements. And so we used the venture capitalist approach in terms of seed funding to identify what would work to support a particular solution. So we would start with something like scanning, right? Like digital intake. That's clearly something that's pretty broad. You can distill the requirements after some hard work and effort. You can distill the requirements down into, we want to scan paper and make a digital image of it. We want to make sure that we obviously respect and protect the information, taxpayer and otherwise, that we need to do that. And we need to make sure that it plays nicely. That wasn't the technical term that we used, but that it plays nicely with the IRS systems. Normally, the government would take several pages to write out a very prescriptive approach to that. And it would be a fairly traditional year by year type procurement. We had the first phase for this one be 6 months. And we really wanted to be able to test what would work. We started with, I think, 5 awardees, and then whittled it down to 3 for those that were the best fit for us. We within Team Digi have done that 4 times for different types of requirements over the past 12 or 15 months. And on average, the awards from solicitation release to contract award have taken 27 calendar days. That allows us to really move forward quickly, identify what works well, what doesn't work well, and perhaps most importantly, learn as we go on. There are mistakes that I made during the first one that we've learned from immensely, and the team has corrected my errors, and we continue to identify errors and ways to do things better. And that cadence really allows us to do that. We don't have to wait a year or 2 years or 5 years to learn from what we've done. We're able to shorten that cadence and really, frankly, invest in what works, and let what doesn't work or what's not the right match or the right fit at this time, let that go by the wayside and continue to move forward and ultimately scale what works and let go what doesn't.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So also, Harrison, thank you for helping me build up this panel. I asked Harrison who he knew would be an advocate to share their expertise in doing very creative things for innovation. So Shanna and Scott came to this event from Harrison. Thank you so much for that.
Yes, ma'am.
So next up, Scott Simpson, DHS. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Yes, my name is Scott Simpson. I'm the digital transformation lead with the DHS Procurement Innovation Lab. And I'm also an innovation coach, and we've got 4 pillars at the DHS PIL. We want to streamline evaluations. So we've got 4 things we're trying to do there: is increase competition, decrease entry barriers, increase the likelihood of successful outcomes, and find new entrants. And so as an innovation coach and a digital transformation lead, that's what I do at the PIL all day.
Very cool. So something that you shared with me that I thought is really exciting that I'd love you to teach back to the group and the listeners is your success around show me, don't sell me.
Show me, don't tell me.
Don't tell me. Okay.
They're still trying to sell me. That's their job.
I guess so, right?
Right. So when we're coaching teams to use innovative procurement techniques, we're not just doing that for the sake of innovation. It's not just to do that, right? We're trying to accomplish one of those 4 goals, like increasing the likelihood of successful performance, right? We want vendors who are more likely to meet our mission at the end of the day. And one of the ways that we can do that is, especially in the digital space with software and all those other things, is the show me, don't tell me approach. That can take a lot of different avenues. We can do something like an oral presentation. We can do a product demonstration. We can do a coding challenge. And they all help our stakeholders to better evaluate whether the solution that a vendor is proposing really does meet their needs. So a few years ago, we had a team from the US Coast Guard. They needed a new system for their auxiliary volunteers to use. It's called the Aux Data System. It's a web interface where they get orders, where they get reimbursement for boat fuel and avgas and things like that. They get their travel, all of that stuff. They don't get a paycheck, they're just volunteers. And instead of going out and getting like a written proposal for this system outlining what the product was going to do and how the vendor was going to implement it, the Coast Guard team instead had a product demonstration where they brought the vendors in to show them the functionality and answer questions as they went along. Because that's the beauty of an oral presentation, right? It's not a one-way dialogue. It's more like a conversation that we're having here, right? Because you can have understanding and dialogue so you get to where you want to go. Now, the Coast Guard team didn't stop there. They kept moving. They had in the room with them both as evaluators and as advisors, the actual users who are going to use the system at the end of the day. Now, again, I say that these are volunteers. A lot of them are retirees. And so having them be able to comment on whether the system was going to be usable for them at the end of the day, and whether they were going to like waste all this money deploying something that the average volunteer wasn't going to be able to use, that was huge. So the show me, don't tell me approach is a great approach to actually get face time with either the product that you're buying or the people that are going to be doing the work. And the 3 ways that I outlined it today, the oral presentation, the product demonstration, and the technical challenge, those aren't the only ways you can do show me, don't tell me. There's lots of different ways. So it's an approach that's growing as we keep moving through here.
Super cool. Tell me a little bit about data-driven metrics and how you're utilizing AI to measure success of your projects post-procurement.
Yeah. And so we are a lab, so we pride ourselves on data, and we try to have as much data as we can. And we've got the same problems that all of government does, right? We've got so much data, we don't know what to do with it. And so last year we implemented a new system. It's a knowledge management system for us, and it helps us to track the data that we have. So it does take a bit more work because now we have to enter the data, and we have to enter it in a way that you can track and you can do something with. But it's really helpful for us because we can see metrics right away about how, like Harrison said, like how many days does it take for us to award something? He's got a really great one, 27 days. I don't know if we can beat that on average, but we've got those kind of metrics. We're also using those kind of metrics, and we put them through at the end of every procurement that the PIL coaches a team on. We talk with the vendors and the evaluators that took part in that procurement to find out what did we do well, what can we improve upon, where do we need to change. We have this data, and for a long time, it was kind of a binary data set. It was this effective or was it ineffective? And then tell us why, but the tell us why was really just going into a folder. Well, with this knowledge management system, we're able to take the tell us why, and we're able to put it through sentiment analysis to find out those good words and the bad words, and to find out whether a technique has more good words and bad words via the sentiment analysis. We're also able to find out really quickly those trends. So if every time we ask someone about an advisory down select, they mention speed or accuracy or convenience or something like that, those words will show up really fast for us. And you can see just by going in and running the sentiment analysis on an innovative procurement technique, what those keywords are to focus in on both the good things and the bad things, the things that we're doing well and need to focus on, and the things that can be improved upon.
Excellent. Harrison, what are your thoughts on the show me, don't tell me?
Yeah, I mean, and Scott, thanks for the shout out on the timeline. We have a lot of people to thank for that, primarily Marcia Almeida, Guy Torres, and Todd Anthony, and Shanna for supporting the crazy idea we once thought it was. But the piece that you talked about around the show me, don't tell me, I think is really, really important, because we sometimes get into these situations where we fund contracts in sort of a traditional approach. It's, even if it's firm fixed price for the entire duration, we've got to go through security clearances. We've got to get access to information. And one of the spaces that we've worked really hard within Team Digi to look at is, how do we use publicly available information to test it out, right? How do we really identify what might be possible? I mean, I think every single one of the forms that the IRS uses is publicly available, but some of them actually are there publicly available versions of completed ones. So in one of our challenges that was for optical character recognition, we simply stated that we wanted to be able to extract information, machine readable data, out of low resolution images. And we define low resolution as 120 DPI or less. And we were able to point to literally thousands of publicly available forms that are available and say, here you go. Like these have already been cleared. They're supposed to be there. FPDS data is another great example, right? If you're looking for data to be able to crunch and have anybody get access to and be able to leverage that innovation, utilizing that publicly available information while you're going through the security clearance process, while you're getting laptops, while you're doing these other types of things is a real game changer, because then you're not, frankly, you can create a sunk cost bias unintentionally by waiting for that process. You can say, oh, it took us 6 months to get this or 6 weeks to do that. Let's just keep going. If you're able to find out pretty quickly, 30, 60, 90 days, and for a relatively small dollar amount, everybody gets to make their decisions with more information, and everybody gets to frankly pursue what works well. I mean, I think that one of the pieces here in the down select area is Jennifer, as you and many of the listeners probably know infinitely better than I do, there's a reason it's called a wrap rate, right? Your costs to track and identify and chase and capture and BD and all those things, they roll into the prices that the federal government pays. So if we're able to decrease and limit, help, identify evaluation factors that are more tied to it, the show me, don't tell me activity. The max limit for pages is 5 pages or 10 pages, followed by an oral demonstration. or solutions demonstration. That's the kind of things that allows people to really focus on what they're good at, supporting the mission, the technology solution, an innovative approach, and gets us out of sometimes, right, doesn't work for all things, but sometimes spending an inordinate amount of time on the items that don't really make a distinction between the approaches and don't really allow the industry partners to really demonstrate their value proposition.
Excellent. And this data, the show me, don't tell me, this is available how?
So from my perspective, it depends, right? There's a lot of different ways to do it. I think the two examples that I gave was we did something on extracting information out of low resolution images. We were able to identify publicly available data. For scanning and intake, that can be done with anything, right? How are you going to scan? What's the pace at which you do it? How do you open the mail? How do you get off binder clips, rubber bands, those kinds of things? There are lots of different ways to do it. And one of the things we found that was really, really interesting when we got down to the very, very nitty gritty of what the requirements were, what the user, to Scott's point, I mean, that's fantastic, what the user actually needed, and left the rest of it as open as we could, while again, being appropriate and security conscious and all these types of things. People would literally come up with ideas that we never thought about. It's like, I never thought that was possible, had no idea. Now, it may not be that it was always, frankly, worth the investment, but we opened up that aperture to understand what was possible. And again, let the industry partners focus on what they were really good at. So I think there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's quote unquote dummy data, there's representative data, there's publicly available information. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I think it just depends on the solution.
Awesome. Thank you both, Harrison and Scott. Great information. All right, Sabathia from State Department, and I've had the opportunity to work with her personally, so I'm super excited to have her join. I was working with Keith Jones on a big project. I'd worked with Keith at USCIS, and then most recently at IRM, State Department, and talking about large contracts of software licenses. And he brings in the guru. He's like, this woman's incredible. She's going to help you scale out and size down and make sure there's not duplicative software. And I was a little bit like, oh shit, awesome. Like, this is great. This is what we want, right? To not have repetitive data, to be able to have the ROI and the cost savings. Sabathia was on the call. She's like, she's going to handle it. She did. Then my customers I was working with were having calls with her. So she saved me a lot of time. So I'm super excited to have her on. And also, it's really cool with Sabathia, your background of being a developer. So consuming the data and developing applications, and then to be able to understand the technology that you're then also evaluating and consolidating and potentially procuring. So welcome. Oh, you're on mute, him.
I'm
there
sorry.
You go.
I just unmuted myself. Well, thank you for that intro, Jennifer. I do appreciate it. It's just honestly a little humbling to be on this panel with these wonderful folks. And I just wanted to start off by saying that I recognize the former colleagues from DHS. I spent over 12 years at DHS headquarters with Scott, and then Harrison, I think, left quite a few years ago, but I still remember being in meetings with you, Harrison, with OPO. So, I started at State Department last year. It's been a little over a year, and it's been quite a very wonderful journey, I should say. I just wanted to talk a little bit about, having come from that development background. I had a division in State Department in IRM, which stands for Information Resource Management, that does vendor performance management. So my division that I lead does vendor performance management. So we have, we're lucky enough to see all of the various vendors and evaluate their performance. I'm a big proponent of using the power of software as a service. I've seen it used elsewhere across the federal government very successfully. And I was quickly able to kind of take that technology that we already have at State Department and develop an app that was previously using kind of legacy legacy mechanisms, such as SharePoint, InfoPath, all that stuff, and was able to kind of bring this application to life in software as a service now application, right? So the most revealing part of this this effort was kind of shedding the light from a data perspective on the number of tools and applications that have overlapping capabilities. So I think what the data revealed to us was, number one, all of these different software tools that had been developed and kind of were in use at State Department, and how many of them were kind of overlapping with others in terms of capability, and how we could potentially use the utilization numbers and metrics around these software to kind of whittle it down, right? So I think that it kind of it helps stop the spread of IT sprawl, which is kind of another thing that we all kind of have to deal with and try to kind of tame. And I think ultimately spreading IT sprawl, stopping the spread of IT sprawl, I should say, translates to greater efficiency and cost savings for the federal government. So I'm just, we've begun this journey here in kind of understanding what our, ecosystem looks like, what the different pieces of software are, how many are overlapping, and, and to see how we can optimize the use of it. I think that IT sprawl also kind of leads to another topic, which is shadow IT. Yeah. So Jennifer.
Yeah, and we can cover that because Gundeep's going to talk about a little bit about how he's eliminated shadow IT, which is incredible. So we're going to hear from the perspective of a CIO. Svathi, before we move into shadow IT, your relationship with the CIO and the respect that you've earned, can you share a little bit about how you've gotten to that level in your career? And for anyone that needs to maybe improve that relationship within that leadership role, what would you recommend? Anyone in your role in a different agency?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, Jennifer. As I just stated, I came from the Department of Homeland Security. I spent over 5 years at the Department of Homeland Security being the OCIO liaison to the Secretary of Homeland Security. So in my position there as the CRM or the OCIO liaison, I worked very closely with some of the most difficult customers that we had at Homeland Security. And although it seemed daunting at first, I think it was ultimately very rewarding, and I made a lot of wonderful connections there in kind of like looking at the needs and providing solutions to solve mission areas for our most senior leaders at Homeland Security. So I think that I think at least for the time that I was there, I had the portfolio, and for the longest time, I was there for 5 years. So I think that, some of that credibility probably was built from my having had that experience and having been in that role. And I think that it's very gratifying that, some of that reputation you carry forward with you in your career. So I would say, it's dedication. It's kind of following the mission, if you will, and listening to your customer base, which I always did. Listen to your customer base, take it back to senior leadership, take it to the folks in OPO, keep your CIO in the loop. Because what senior leadership wants is what they want to ultimately, fulfill the mission.
Excellent. Great advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have Gundeep from the Department of Labor. Hello, sir. How are you?
Well, you served me, and I'm wearing a tie and the most boring one on this panel. So I'm doing just fine.
I would love to have you share with the group the importance of outcomes, not outputs.
So thank you so much for having me, and it is always amazing to meet colleagues of mine from across the government, except Harrison. Yeah, I got it right, Harrison, right? Um,
Well done, sir. Well done.
No,
I hate your tie. No.
It is a pleasure. So at the department, I will tell you early on. So I want to take a moment first to actually congratulate the entire vendor community and the federal workplace space on having done so fantastically, phenomenally during the pandemic. Right, in the last 2 years, these partnerships have really tested and have come out on top. I would say across the board, whether it's OSHA investigators keeping workplaces safe during COVID, or wage and hour investigators being on the job, or doing labor certificates to get temp workers into the country in the labor department, IRS doing their job of making sure there's no fraud happening, or getting the checks out to the people in a timely fashion, or Homeland Security keeping our borders secure, cannot be done without the vendor community. So I think that is one lesson that I learned very early in my federal career, right? And then I had to, unlike Harrison, I had to actually learn what procurement means and how it's spelled, right? So that's where we started. And I have been early on, I was a victim of the output-based contracts, firm fixed price. Oh my God, every time somebody says LPTA, I almost fall off my chair. And it's like, so I had to go through the different aspects of contracting. Now, I will tell you, there is enough latitude, and this is another thing that I've learned from my colleagues, including Addison. There is enough latitude in the FAR. Okay, so don't blame the FAR. Instead, try to harness the latitude that is built in there to innovate. Whether it's simple things like introducing leasing. We couldn't afford laptops when I came. We had 8-year-old laptops in the department, right? And nobody could allow me to lease with a 1-year appropriation, right? A laptop and pay for it for over 4 years. And guess what? We found a way to do it. It's about relationships. It is about truly living the spirit of Fitara, right? I mean, Fitara wanted the acquisition shops, the CIOs, the CHICOs, and the financial officers to be knit together to drive outcomes within the department. Now, outcome-based contracting is something which is extremely important. I think we need to be able to measure value and drive efficiency over time, right? Gone are the days where, okay, I will pay you by the ticket, and hopefully we will land in the right place. It almost always leads to the operation succeeds, but the patient dies, right? And that is not what we are trying to do. Therefore, it has to be an outcome-based contracting approach. And we've tried to introduce this in various parts in the Department of Labor and have been successful to varying degrees. I think we have to reach a maturity where we do it consistently. We do it across all our contracts. We have introduced some checklists and processes where it allows us to drive these statements of work towards outcomes, right? And not outputs from the beginning itself. It's fine if we may go for a LPTA, but somebody has to show me a reason why we are going to go for price only, right? And those are the kind of things that we have introduced. Now, I will also say that we have leveraged some innovative ways to do competitions, competition on prototypes, on piloting. When I was at the Food and Drug Administration, we utilized the broad agency announcement, which is a very which is a lesser known contracting vehicle. You put out a couple of bullet points and then you sit with the vendors and talk through it. Well, here's what I can do. Well, but I don't have that kind of money. So how can we shape the scope of this project so that it comes within my affordability, but also creates incremental value in terms of forward progress. The last thing I would say is one of the secret sauce, and we did consolidate IT. All 2210s were consolidated in the OCIO within the Department of Labor. It was a mammoth task, but I think the reason it has succeeded thus far in DOL is the relationships, right? So the CIO is not at odds with program areas or procurement or how do I accredit this, or why is the CISO not putting a stop to this? What are the privacy concerns? How do I move a PRA package together? So the reason all of these things are working well in the Department of Labor, even in a consolidated state, is the relationships and that lateral net that we've been able to build between all the CXOs, including the CIO.
Yeah, excellent. So let's jump into the conversation around shadow IT and where labor is. And anyone listening, Gundeep is the CIO, so different perspective, also working hand in hand and has a solid relationship with his procurement team. That's a great synergy. We're seeing the benefits of that live as he's sharing his innovation. So a little bit about shadow IT and your vision on that and what you've been able to accomplish.
So, like I said, we have about 27 different program areas. So Department of Labor is very diverse in its mission focus, right? So we are the beginning of every immigration journey and temp worker visas that are issued. We protect your 401ks on a regular basis. So we have to integrate with Treasury, with PBGC, and a bunch of other agencies to do that. We are flying drones to inspect oil rigs in OSHA. We've deployed virtual reality headsets to do mine safety training and how to avoid mine disasters. We do workman compensation claims for 2 million federal employees across the nation, right? So that's a check writing operation. That's a identity proofing that involves connections to doctors and nurses, and make sure that we are not overprescribing opioids and things of that nature. And everybody knows us for the jobless claims that comes out on a weekly and a monthly basis, right? Then we have the consumer price index and how the economy is behaving. The bank rates are dependent on us. CMS decides how Medicare payments are going to be linked to the statistics that we produce and put out there. So that kind of you have a statistical arm program, and flying drones and collecting data, to integrating with, we are the Veteran Employment Training Services. So we do the TAP program for transition assistance for all veterans returning home. It's not VA, it's actually Department of Labor, right? So very varied kind of case management systems. Some case management systems require a large payload, a small number of transactions. Other have seasonality, like the temp worker program. Well, we are going into crab picking season, so we have a seasonality of temp worker applications coming in, et cetera, et cetera. It makes it very, very important to have the capacity and a strategy that caters to that wide variance, right? So we were able to collect, and all of them had their own IT when I joined 6 years ago. So OCIO was providing only the infrastructure, and they had their own IT teams. We started building and reforming the commodities of IT. And once the program areas got that success, they said, yep, I can sign up to giving up my IT if I get the same level of reform, speed, and economies on the mission application delivery side, because that's where the rubber meets the road. At the end of the day, nobody comes here to provision laptops or upgrade Windows servers. Department of Labor is here to protect the American people and train them for the future, right? So that's how we got to where we are today. Now, I also caution people against over consolidation, right? So you have to have a certain level of, I will deploy a local team and matrix them into a program area for a finite amount of time. You have to allow for those circumstances. Otherwise, a truly consolidated model, I will use my stick every single time, does not work.
Yeah, for sure. What are you all doing with bots?
So we actually, Harrison and I Harrison planted this idea, I think, of introducing bots. So one of the first things that I got a demo actually of a bot when Harrison was running procurement at IRS. We have actually introduced bots on the procurement side to improve the experience. One of the areas is responsibility determination, and oh boy, fourth quarter is full of responsibility determination in the procurement shop, right? And it is less than efficient to go to 6, 7, 8 different sites for a contracting officer, and it has to be done at the time of award. So it's not like I did a analysis on vendor A, and then I can 3 days later I have to repeat it if I'm doing another contract with them. So we implemented a bot to automate that collection of the data. But now we are trying to take it a step further, because RPAs are, while great, right? We need to inject a little bit of intelligence in that, right? So pre-digest the data and rate and help the contracting officer do the responsibility analysis for that contractor. So we are taking it to the next level. We've deployed bots in a lot of different areas. For instance, there was in our job corps, we used to, there was people who were staring at receipts and statements for travel vouchers and trying to see if there are any inconsistencies. Now the bot does it automatically and spits out the inconsistency and gives it to a person. So we moved all of that staff to different areas. So there are other bots. We have set up an emerging tech center of excellence, and Krista Kennard, who leads it for the Department of Labor, and she's done a phenomenal job in not only implementing these responsible bots and injecting AI and coming up with positive mission outcomes, but she's also generated an enormous amount of pull. So that's one area where we actually we had to stop. Otherwise, usually people say like, oh, CIO is here to shove technology down my throat. That area, we actually have a demand and a backlog.
Excellent. Very cool and creative and innovative. All the things at the Department of Labor. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Shanna, who is now with FDIC. Former, I believe you hired Harrison. Is that the story I've heard? So you're responsible
That's
for
a story on the street. Don't forget, Harrison.
Now I know who to blame, Shanna.
Exactly. Exactly. She's
That's
still
right.
recovering from that error.
Yeah.
Still recovering from that error.
Shanna, can you share a little bit about your role now new at FDIC, and when you're ready to jump into something that you've created about, from procurement's perspective, how to hold the OEMs and the FSIs accountable for what they're offering and the services and the products?
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm so excited to be here with you guys. As she said, my name is Shanna Webbers. I'm known around the acquisition community as Shanna Banana, so you guys can just let it roll right off the top of your tongue. I know who you're talking about, and I will definitely answer to it. As Jennifer said, I've been at the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation for about 5 months now. It's a fantastic opportunity for me. Prior to that, I was at the IRS, the Chief Procurement Officer there for about 6 years. Had a fantastic job supporting Harrison's crazy ideas and really just providing top cover to our procurement specialists so that they could be innovative. Prior to that, I did about 25 years in various organizations across the Department of Defense. And everywhere I go, I learn something new. And when I sit on these podcasts, it just inspires me of what I hear what my colleagues are doing. And it really just is a reminder of how we need to collectively join hands and not reinvent the wheel. Figure out what somebody else is doing and how can we implement that in our organization. And those relationships, as others have talked about, are so critically important for us to be able to do that. An area that's innovative at FDIC that I'd like to share today is around OEMs and FSIs and holding them accountable. And as you all know, oftentimes the customers want to maintain the incumbent. They like having the person that they've had for a different contract, and that's what they want their preferences. And procurement, that's not the way the procurement process actually works. And a way that we can provide some assurances to the customer is we've created a contract clause where in some instances, if the vendor who we've selected for the award is not able to perform satisfactory based off specific metrics that we've identified and that we're accurately and creative and monitoring consistently, then we will notify that vendor no longer has the contract, and we actually go to the next vendor, the second vendor that was on the list. And so whether you call that a stick or a carrot, it is really a way just for contractors to be put on notice. Hey, we're really serious that we need you to perform what we've asked you to perform, and that there are others out there in the marketplace who probably are just as competitive, and we're going to move to them if you are not able to perform. So that's an area where I had not seen that use of a clause such as this. That's very creative. At the FDIC, we don't follow the FAR, and so we do have some flexibilities beyond those that the FAR allows, and this is an instance of where we are looking to create those flexibilities.
I think that's incredible. I know from industry that we want to be adding value all the time, but we also want to have a chance to actually come and be a part of your technology solutions. And when we feel like we're outside looking in, this may give some vendors an opportunity to show up. Gundeep, you and I've talked about before also about the vendors needing to add value consistently. How do you ask them to show up to be more valuable each time you're looking at new technology?
So I think it is the construct. I think actually I'm sure every vendor wants to deliver more value, and because it improves their chances of staying and doing more business, right? It's just it's as simple as that. And the government wants to drive more value as well. But I think what we do is set up poor constructs of outcome-based. How many tickets did you solve? What is the speed to resolution? And that it misses the value proposition. And then we manage the vendor relationships in a similar fashion, right? So we are not putting constructs in quarterly reviews, maybe adding some awards if they find efficiencies, letting them share the rewards of an efficiency they find for the government, right? And all of these constructs are available in the FAR, and we started introducing them in our we recently did our enterprise service desk recompete, and we've tried to introduce some of these innovations in there as well. Doing simple things like I remember when I came in, the cell phones were on 5-year contracts, or the laptops were on 5-7-year contracts. And guess what? You could buy that particular model much cheaper at Best Buy, and this was the standard problem. Guess what? Every IT commodity contract now has a price de-escalation or a price match clause in it. What does that mean? When an iPhone 13 comes out, I as a personal consumer, expect 12 to be $200 cheaper, or I get 13 for free, right? Those kind of constructs have now been added to our contracts as standard, right? So if you start injecting the mechanisms where the contract or the vendor community can show the value on a regular basis, then that efficiency, that will drive efficiency across the ecosystem. Otherwise, if it is an option year and it's output based, then I'm going to wait till the next option year and I'm going to close and open as many tickets as possible because I'm being paid by the ticket, right? So it is on us. The onus is on us to actually partner with vendors. And I strongly recommend to do proper market research and talk to the vendor community, right? Because sometimes in the federal space, we don't even know what the realm of the possible is unless we talk to them. So I think that is what the mantra is, to bring continuous reform and push efficiency and value generation. That's the other thing that I don't talk about. Most of my program areas always want me to charge them less, but they don't talk about, hey, I have a bicycle and I take 3 trips to Baltimore from DC every day. Can you get me a motor car, please? That'll cost you more. The oil change is going to be more expensive. So let's talk about value generation. I will get you to Baltimore in under 60 minutes, right? Rather than you schlepping on a bicycle to Baltimore every day and schlepping back, right? So I think the value generation aspect is is often ignored, and we need to inject that into the conversation in a systemic manner.
Yeah, great, thank you. Shanna, just to come back to you, I have a question that came in from Trisha, just to clarify. That clause is not just for product vendors, it is for services, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
And I don't know how new this clause is, but if it's, has it been applied? Have you been able to execute on that?
We have it in contracts, but we've never had to implement it.
Okay.
So I'm glad to say that the vendors are performing like we have expected that they will perform. And so it's there in case we need it. We are using it judiciously. Obviously, we don't want to just automatically put it in everything. We are ensuring that it's appropriate when we would actually use that clause. And also as we're going through this, really just taking an opportunity to consider lessons. Even if we have not implemented that specific aspect of the clause, there are things that we've learned. And the importance of my team recognizing the difference between lessons learned, which means we want to implement and do something different with that knowledge, or just a lesson acknowledged, meaning we've learned something, but we're not going to change our behavior. But understanding those differences and monitoring those is really the key to help us understand, are we using this appropriately? When would we use it? And continuing to learn from that, and not just using it once and then arbitrarily putting it in because, oh, look, this is something new and innovative, let's just do it for everything. So I think that's an important aspect as well. When you're talking about innovation and trying something different, is really being deliberate and learning from that.
Okay, great. Another question, Shanna, for you and Harrison, since y'all work together, and I understand the creativity on both sides. With being creative for innovation comes change, and we all know change is hard. We know change in politics is hard, right? How did you all solve that? What were some of the things that you were able to implement to make the change a little bit less resistant?
Well, Harrison got a lot of great ideas. And so one way that I was able to empower Harrison is to let him take those ideas and run with them, but give him some guide rails. And so that way we were very clear on what we were going to do collectively together. I do want to mention, Jennifer, that as Harrison and I were looking to be really creative across the IRS, is I would go to a contracting officer and say, hey, Scott, on this procurement, can you try this type of acquisition approach? Was it different? And because of my great negotiating skills, I would convince them to do it. Fast forward, one of my supervisors came to say that I was creating a lot of angst with the acquisition, my team, that they had a whole workload that they needed to take care of. They had a lot of pressure from the acquisition that they had sitting on their desk to get those awarded quickly. And by doing something different, it was creating starts and stops, and it was taking them longer, and it was creating some angst, which was not the intent. What Harrison and I did was we created something similar to the Procurement Innovation Lab in DHS, but we called ours a Procurement Innovation Branch with an innovative contracting lab, where we had COs that were actually doing that hands-on trying and experimenting. And similar to the lab at DHS, the lab and IRS was intended to be just that. Let's try something and see if it works. And so it was a very confined way that we were able to control what we were looking to innovate, as well as the outcomes of that, really doing that deliberate lessons learned versus lessons acknowledged. Our attorneys and lawyer partners were more comfortable with the fact that they didn't feel like we were doing wild, wild west, that we had it a little bit more contained. And we used that organization, the Procurement Innovation Lab, as the change agents. That, they would try it, and then they helped create artifacts for when you should use it, things that they had already learned, so we didn't have to relearn those exact same lessons, and then rolled out more broadly to the acquisition community. They also were there to be consultants similar to what the lab was doing, that as somebody was trying it, if they had a question, that they would be able to actually go to someone who has done it in the past. This allowed us to keep that procurement machine really just pumping out procurements throughout the fiscal year, but allowing for that thinking strategically and thinking different, and giving the team the freedom that it's okay if the innovation fails, which I think is really important.
Yeah, and the air coverage, right? We've talked about that as the leader. Harrison, any thoughts?
Yeah, and I think that's the piece where the guardrails are so important, because there are sort of experts in a process and experts in an activity, and you want to, and their name is, to be completely blunt, not Harrison Smith. So the ability to focus on what people who have been doing a particular process for X number of days, weeks, months, years, and say, how would you do this? Well, this is how we do it because of X, Y, Z. No, I understand what you're saying, but how would you do this? It's their challenge that you're trying to help them with, and you're trying to say, hey, we can try it in this circumstance. Do not touch that one. Absolutely not. Leave that alone. Try it here. See if it works. Learn, move forward. And I think that piece about capturing it is wildly important. I think frequently the types of people who want to try something different, who want to move quickly and break things, right? There's a goodness in that. But Stephen Blank has a concept called organizational debt. If you have too many people running around breaking things, and you have too many people trying to move carefully, or you have too many people trying to move carefully and fix things without each other, and there's some inherent tension in there, but without each other, an organization gets out of whack. So by establishing those guardrails and identifying what's possible and what are acceptable levels of risk to take on, and to Shanna's point, saying, you mess up, this is on me, my fault. When it succeeds, it's yours all day long. And I think, Scott, the example of the pills, I'm going to mess it up, but it's like the yearbook, the year in review. It's got a movie theme, I think. Is that right, Scott?
Yeah, that's right. It's just come out this week. It's our yearbook, our 2020 yearbook.
Yeah, and I think that's the piece that to me was, because I remember when we were sitting with Eric Cho on the first handful of those, and the people who were talking about the successes and talking about what worked well and talking about, frankly, what didn't work well, were the people who were doing it. So if it's someone like me who's out there saying, well, this was an issue, but we worked through it, and Eric Cho and Scott Simpson and Polly Hall and Soraya Correa and Tim Shaughnessy helped us get through this. People, it's not some random amorphous concept, right? It's oh, I know Harrison, like that guy's a doofus. I can totally do that. Like that's the piece where we're distilling it and making it safer for folks to take chances. And really putting your money where your mouth is from a systemic standpoint. There will be mistakes. Frankly, I liken this to like skiing in jeans. I might be dating myself a little bit, but if you ski in jeans and you're not sopping wet at the end of the day, my version is you're not trying hard enough. You haven't fallen, you haven't made a mistake. I was never really that good a skier, but that's why I didn't wear jeans. But that's the piece where understanding where you can fall down and where it's safe, right? Don't want to fall into the tree. Let's fall into the snowbank, get up, put our skis back on, and continue making progress down the hill.
Yeah, one of the things, Jennifer, when you talk about change management that Harrison and I learned is that when you have a great idea that's novel, or you think it's a great idea, oftentimes the customers may agree, but they don't want it tried on them. And so, there were some instances where Harrison and I said, okay, we're going to try it on ourselves. We're going to be guinea pigs for ourselves. We're going to take one of our own requirements and see if this new process works. Because at the end of the day, the customers were more confident when we were able to show proof and an actual demonstration of where that approach did give the outcome that we were looking for as a way to validate that it would work for them too, if we said it would. So I think that that's another part of change management. They don't always come when you have a good idea. Sometimes you have to be the ones that actually take the chance and try to move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think it helps that y'all seem to love your work, right? It makes a difference and y'all get along so well. I'm going to take one last question because we're just about out of time. I hope everyone is loving this hour. So well spent together. I'm going to actually combine two questions, one that came in before the call. Thank you, Nina, for sending this one in. Nina would like to hear how the White House executive order for customer experience is impacting how we procure technology that helps manage and improve public experience. And I think the answer to that may have a little bit to do with how we could utilize TMF. Harrison, you and I chatted that you are ready to take this question on.
Well, ready to maybe respond to it. I don't take it on. Sounds a little bit too much like it's requiring an intelligent and fully couched answer.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
On the fly and go.
Exactly. So I think there's a couple pieces here. First is that the nature of engagement and improvement of customer experience or taxpayer experience, or whatever you want to call it, requires feedback, right? And we have to be real that type of feedback might be simple if I'm a Verizon customer, if I'm an AT&T customer, if I'm a T-Mobile cell phone user, right? I can sign up and say, yep, I'm good with providing my information. I use Google, they're going to track my search history. And it's not always the same. In fact, it's frequently not the same with the federal government, right? We have to handle information differently. We have, frankly, a higher level of responsibility in many spaces. So that ability to, frankly, even to have a survey, right? To have a survey that Shannon and I worked on with our industry partners. How do you feel about these things? How do you feel about the work that we're doing? Are we getting better over time? There are specific hurdles that the government has to go through to do something like that. And so that's why I think it goes back to the conversation around how can you perhaps get representative data in the appropriate fashion? How can you get publicly available data in the appropriate fashion? How can you find out ways to sequence things so you can really optimize the user experience, right? Really optimize the customer experience. And I think sometimes frequently it's around throughput, right? We want to be careful. Gundeep and I were having a conversation about this a couple of weeks ago. You want to be careful about applying a technological solution to a particular aspect of the problem without stitching the entire process together. If you don't make the appropriate adjustments in your business processes and your policy decisions, you're never going to optimize the existing technology stack or be able to make truly informed decisions about how things go forward. So I think the customer experience, not just the executive order, but also the president's management agenda, it also highlights the importance of that. And I think how that kind of lumps into a little bit of what the Technology Modernization Fund is looking at is they've asked for proposals, and this is all on the website. They've asked for proposals around customer experience. And I think very indicative of sort of the incremental fashion of doing something new and different, that process has continued to evolve. So they have expressions of interest forms, they have initial project proposals, and you'll see that Gundeep and Labor, among others. I think there's 17 agencies and 29 approved projects, I think are the most recent numbers. And Jennifer, you and I were talking about there's sometimes an incorrect understanding of, well, you've got to pay it all back. To be fair, that is the default, but there's a particular part within the repayment guidance on the website that talks about in what particular circumstances the TMF board might be willing to accept something different or something less than full repayment. Obviously, we want to be able to continue to invest in the projects, but there are times when less than full repayment may make sense.
Excellent. One last thought. Thank you, ATARC, for hosting us. If this was exciting for my panelists as well as people listening, if you want to partake in a up-and-coming working group in ATARC on creative procurement for innovation, that is about to launch, and we're looking for volunteers from the government as well as industry that would like to participate. And by doing that, you get to serve up new ideas. It could be a podcast, it could be a white paper, it could be a blog. I would love to talk to you. Drop me a note if this was beneficial, and please send our panelists so much love on LinkedIn or on email. You guys are awesome, guys and girls. Thank you so much Have an amazing day. Bye for
Thanks,
now.
Jennifer. Thanks, Atark. Have a good day.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Great job. Y'all did great.